you got to offer prototyping services as well, right? I know there are some companies out there that they just want production. They don't want to do small quantities. And in fact, I know Nick couldn't make this one, but he wanted to mention Jason Primo had a post recently about his work, talking about how he offers prototype services, and that turns into production, right? And you just mentioned that too. Like a lot of the parts you make turn into production if it goes to production, and that's absolutely essential.
Hey, Metalworking Nation. Welcome to Making Chips, the longest running manufacturing podcast that's been equipping, inspiring manufacturing leaders since 2015. I'm Mike Payne. I've got Paul Van Meter with me. Paul, this is our first time to be hosts alone.
It is. And we figured out a minute ago we didn't even know how to hit record. So
they asked us to record and didn't give us the button.
Yeah. Jason and Nick have probably far more trust in us than we deserve. So
they're not here, so we can do whatever we want.
We can do whatever the hell we want.
This could be fun.
We can curse. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they do still talk to the editors though. So
they'll bleep that out. All right.
Yeah, maybe. So Paul, how about
yes.
You got any manufacturing leader spotlights you'd like to do today?
In this community of manufacturing leaders, there's always somebody doing something amazing, but most of the time, it goes unseen. MakingChips wants to change that, one leadership story at a time. It's time to give credit to the best in the business. It's time to learn from our peers so we can all rise together. It's time for MakingChips to shine the manufacturing leadership spotlight.
I do. I was actually just was talking to a couple of guys I interviewed for my Machine Shop Mastery podcast that just, I think, exemplify like how to run a shop and how to build and grow a shop well. And that is Mitch and Brian Olson from Olson Custom Designs, shortened to OCD, which I think is a great name for a company.
I like
and
that.
They intentionally, definitely named it that. Play on words. But these guys, they used to be in racing, like race car drivers and, running their own race teams and stuff. It sounds like when they got injured enough, they decided they shouldn't keep doing that and realized they're mortal. Brian decided to start a machine shop, invited his brother Mitch to come join it with him. And without even ever turning on a CNC machine in their life, they bought a couple of machines in late 2014. So just 10 years ago.
Wow.
And today they're running 22 machines, 3 shifts, almost 70 employees. They're AS certified, they're 1345 certified, and they have lots of production work. Just a really impressive company that I think is kind of an aspiration, for many shops out there. They have a beautiful building. They really care about their image, their brand, their professionalism, being an incredible partner for their clients. And I just think it's fantastic. So they're olsoncustomdesigns.com. Go check out their website. It's pretty cool.
Where are they located?
They're right near Indianapolis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting you said that they got their start in racing. It's actually pretty fascinating. I know we talked about this at IMTS on the stage about how many people in this industry got started in some sort of automotive racing.
Yeah.
Yourself included.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Formula SAE for me. I got sucked in. I mean, I liked racing before I even did that, but that's why I did that. That's why I did Formula. But Formula got me into machining, right?
Yeah.
I needed to make parts and kind of fell in love with it. So
I know growing up around here, around the Tulsa area, my brother-in-law raced sprint cars.
Yeah, and that's what these guys were into.
Okay, so I'd spend time on the weekends going with him, and actually the first time I'd ever walked into Hill Manufacturing, because he worked there when I was probably in middle school, was like on a weekend he was making some parts for his car.
Oh, that's cool.
I've got a few friends that still race, and maybe once a year or something I'll get out to a dirt track, and the number of machine shops that are on the side of a car are.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's car,
critical.
Yeah.
Well, just like everything in the world, it wouldn't happen without machining, especially those things. They got billet and machine parts all over them. So
Yeah, that's cool.
It's not surprising.
So you mentioned they were a production shop.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about production shops today.
Yeah, we're talking about how to win production work for your shop. I think it's something that I would say most contract manufacturers, job shops aspire to have, is production work. I know back in the Pro CNC days, it provided a level of comfort and security knowing that we were going to be doing certain part numbers just over and over and over again.
Right.
We were definitely not a high volume shop. A big order for us was maybe a couple hundred parts. Many of them were under 100, but they came back over and over again.
Yeah,
right?
That's very much how we are.
Yeah. I don't think there's that many shops out there that do thousands of parts or tens of thousands, unless they're catering to industries, and using equipment like Swiss or, multi-spindle machines that truly need, just thousands of parts just to feed their customers. But those of us in oil and gas and aerospace and medical and, defense, the numbers are typically not tens of thousands, but that's kind of beside the point.
I guess I don't always describe ourselves as a production shop, but, because the quantities are in that maybe more under 100. I mean, there are jobs that we may run up to 1,000 at a time, something like that. But
you've mentioned time and time again, you have part numbers that the shop's been making since well before you bought it, for decades.
Yeah, so we're 48 years old. There are parts we run that we've been running for 48 years.
Yeah. And even if they're not big quantities, I'd call those production, right? You're feeding, your customers are buying them from you for their production.
Right.
Whatever it is they're making or consuming in their process, they need them over and over again, right?
Yeah, and the point you made about like when you had your shop, of just kind of knowing that, and knowing how to plan for that production. The other nice thing, even when we've had these, slowdowns in the market, we still are making those. We just, instead of maybe an order of 120, we're getting an order of 60. That consistency of those runs is certainly nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the reason I wanted to talk about it is I feel like when I'm in forums and various places online and talking to people, or on LinkedIn or whatever, I see a lot of shops talking about, how do you get production work? Like, we're stuck in this like prototype world. All we can get is super low quantity, doesn't really repeat. Every job we get is a brand new, programming and fixturing and quality plan and everything. And it's incredibly intensive, right? Like, you have to have pretty skilled people to do all that initial development work. NPI is what, new product introduction is what some companies call it. If that's all you got, it's kind of unrelenting, right? You can't set up a machine and let it run for, for a few days with someone maybe that isn't, sort of top tier talent, having to be there to troubleshoot the G code and look for problems and figure out how to make a good part. I don't want to say you can put something on autopilot, but you're that much closer to being able to, just sort of take in an order, do your order entry, pass it off to production, and just let it kind of run. Right?
Yeah, hopefully by then you've got a proven process, right? And you get your G code, your tooling, all those things to be successful on that job after you've run it a few times.
Yeah. Back in the Pro CNC days, we successfully kind of moved from, more quick turn one-off work into, more of a production shop as well, although we always did both, which is one of the key points. But because it is something that so many shops aspire to, I thought it would be a great topic to just kind of talk about. Try to inspire some shops to, put some things in place to kind of maybe move their shops in that direction, because everyone seems to want to do it.
So where do we start? I inherited a lot of my production work, so I want to learn this myself.
Sure. Well, first, I just want to maybe just make sure we covered all of the benefits.
Sure.
And we already talked about a couple of them, but I'll just list off 5 of my top ones. The first one is having recurring revenue, right? Knowing that you have revenue coming over the next months and quarters that you can rely on. I know oftentimes it's not absolutely set in stone, but especially if you have a diversified client base and you have lots of different clients that keep reordering parts, you have a pretty good likelihood that you have some of your nut covered, whether it's your enough to cover your break even point each month, or even and then some. I always found that incredibly comforting, right? There's nothing worse than staring down the end of an empty schedule in like 3 or 4 weeks, and you're like,
Right.
I don't even know what we're going to be running next month.
Right.
That is so stressful at times. So that recurring revenue is just huge. And that frees up all sorts of decision making and planning you could do better, which is probably my second one. You can forecast better, right? When you're looking at machine acquisitions or robots or, even hiring, like what is your growth plan? If you aspire to ship, $1 million a month of revenue, if you already got, 600,000, 700,000 of that in recurring production work, that's a nice level of comfort knowing that you can, make some investments in buying some more automated machines or whatever it is, as opposed to having every month be a brand new month with starting from scratch.
Paul, we on that topic, I mean, lots of times we're looking at that even just from, so being able to use ProShop, for example, to look at tooling on jobs.
Yep.
So we see a new tool, maybe it's some new fancy insert drill or, something that is pricey. We know it'll improve maybe even just this new job, but then being able to go and look and see, okay, where else would we use that exact same drill? And when you start looking at the production levels of those, it starts really helping you justify like, okay, that $500 drill is nothing because we're going to use it 3,000 times this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So whether it's machines or things like, expensive tooling, you can just have a more confident decision-making process about investing in those things.
Yeah.
And you already mentioned this, another one, the third one, and that's just process refinement, right? When you get jobs over and over again, you can really start dialing in your feeds and speeds, your tooling plan, and that just allows you to get more margin, right? When you're doing a brand new job for the first time, I feel like if all the stars align and everything doesn't go almost perfect, there's a good chance you're not going to make a margin on it.
For sure.
100%. You scrap a bunch of parts or you're late and you got to, throw a lot of labor and expedite fees at it. Can really just like wipe out all your profit. So
100%.
I think shops that do production are more profitable because they can really invest in that refinement. Suffice it to say that, and these last two go together, you can invest in more automation. This is, really gets cool. I know you have a robot feeding a robo-job feeding one of your lathes. And you're probably doing that on part numbers that you get on a recurring basis, right?
Yep.
It's just a little bit easier to
almost
plug those in.
Sure.
And even for machines that aren't automated, you can have less skilled labor, right? You can bring in someone that's pretty junior, show them how to run a process, run the machine, cycle start and look for this and inspect this and follow the work instructions in ProShop or whatever. But you don't need that high level person every single time to, spend hours or days at the machine trying to troubleshoot and figure out exactly, what it is you're making. So,
kind of a sub point to that, I'll mention that we use is that's also where we train a lot, right? Because we have a part level that we've been running forever. Everybody that's been in the shop has run that job multiple times. And so that's lots of times the first jobs that we let somebody set up on because one, they are best documented. Two, there's 15, 20 people that can help them if they have questions. And we also can benchmark that in how well they set it up or didn't set it up, their skill level against other people the easiest, right? Because you just have that. We know we run it every month. So we know. So it's a great opportunity to train and upskill people on also.
Yeah. And every shop listening knows, finding super skilled machinists is almost impossible these days. And so if you do have those folks, their highest and best use is probably working on process optimization and building process in your company. In fact, you even, I think, mentioned it, I interviewed Denny Smith at IMTS for Machine Shop Mastery. And he talked about pulling one of his best setup people off of jobs and putting them in more of like a manufacturing engineering kind of process definition role. Right. And that is far more valuable than setting up or running a machine, right, in the grand scheme of a company. So anyway, those are just a few reasons why production work is so valuable. I think every shop listening just inherently knows a lot of those things and why they want it for their own company. But again, it's hard to get there, especially if you're kind of stuck in this trap of customers they think of you as like the quick turn, low quantity shop, and that's all they give you RFQs for.
Yeah.
Right?
I just have a dumb question in the middle of this. So you got your prototype shops. That's truly their focus. You've got shops that do maybe 98% production work or more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some of the shops I've bought have been pure production shops.
Right.
What other buckets are there just for people listening to be able to say, okay, I kind of fall in. I mean, I guess you've got the always out there RFQ and a new job, may never see it again. It's not necessarily prototype, but what other buckets would you put shops in?
Well, there's of course OEMs, the shops that make their own product,
right?
And depending on what markets they serve,
I guess I'm thinking outside of the captive shops, but
yeah. I mean, I would say there's definitely a class of contract manufacturers that only do long-term contract work.
Yeah,
they're like, I don't even want to talk to you if this part number is not $1 million a year,
right?
And they're in a special kind of class of their own, I think.
Yeah, sure.
I'd say on the far end, where they may not even bring on more than a couple new part numbers a year because each one of them is such a major investment in maybe dedicated machines and super dedicated tooling.
Yeah, everything. Sure.
If you think about it in like as a percentage of new part numbers that you bring on relative to the number that you do on a recurring basis.
Yeah.
There's some shops where they're like, sub 5% new part numbers. And there's other shops that are 95% new part numbers all the time or 100% new part numbers.
Yeah.
So
we probably run somewhere in the neighborhood of like 70%, I guess, production and, maybe 30%
repeat parts. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Very good. So anyway, I have 5 main things to do to try to win this production work. The first one comes to positioning and branding and marketing. There's even some shops out there that have like, tool and die in their name.
Right.
But they're trying to win production work. Right. Or they used to be a tool and die shop, but they realize that's a tough business to be in and they really kind of want to move. I'd start by looking at the brand of your company. Like, does that even sound like a production company?
Right.
If someone's searching the internet and they're like, I need to find a new production supplier for my medical device parts or my aerospace parts, are they going to call Bob's Tool and Die Shop? Right. Probably not the first link they're going to click on. So I would look at that. I would look at what your website looks like. If you have brochures or other, marketing materials, what do they look like? Do you have, a picture of a big tool, on the front of your website? Or do you have a picture showing, hundreds of parts or maybe they're just dozens, but they're taken in a way that you can tell there's a bunch of parts.
Right.
And what does it say on your website? I think over the last, decades or so, obviously with the advent of the internet, it puts buyers in a position to do as much research as they want before they ever pick up the phone and call you.
Sure.
Right. They're going to be, browsing through, looking at websites. They're going to see, all right, does this company look like a company that does the kind of work that I have? I know I have, part numbers in the hundreds or thousands to buy every year. So just making sure that the verbiage on your site talks about production. Although I have seen websites that says, from 1 to 1 million, we'll do it all. I think that's too far.
Right.
You're not doing 1 million parts.
Nope.
Unless you actually are in that business of super high volume. Don't say that,
Sure.
But anyway, so I think that's a really important part of it. That perception, that, what those buyers are seeing or what those engineers that might be looking for a new vendor are seeing, that's a part of it. Now, if you're already, entrenched in a company and, all they're sending you is prototype work, it's worth having sitting down, taking them out to lunch, or at least going to visit them and saying, hey, we've been working our tails off, making, all these kind of parts for you. We would really love a crack at your production work. What's it going to take for us to do that?
That's something we had success for shortly after I bought Hill. There was a client that we mostly did production work for them. I did exactly that. I went and approached them and just said, can we take a shot at the production of this work?
So you did mostly prototypes for them. I think you said
for that.
production.
Yeah. For that. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. Mostly prototype for them.
Got it.
And, I just asked, and They said, "Oh, sure, yeah." So when they started sending us the RFQs, it was, 1, 5, 10,
Yep.
and 250
Sure.
was, and of course, utilizing ProShop with the estimating module in there, that's super easy for us to do.
Sure.
And we'd have the NRE, the non-reoccurring expenses in there, and be able to manage that and give them, okay, here's your one piece, here's your first article PPAP price, and here's your production price. And that customer now, if I had to say, I mean, every time we win a production job with them or a prototype job with them, I would say it almost universally has become production, assuming that part went into production.
Got it. Yeah. And I think one of the things you can even be more proactive about is, ask them, what is their like annual production on thing? How many parts of these do you make or do you need to buy each year? Because even an RFQ for 110, 1, 5, 10, and 250 doesn't tell you. Maybe they order 250 a month. Maybe it's 250 a quarter. Maybe that's annual. But if you can start having those conversations and say, oh, that's quarterly. You buy 1,000 of these a year. Why don't I give you 1,000-piece price?
Right.
We'll worry about how the batch sizes are that we build them in. But I will promise to deliver you, have at least 100 on the shelf at all times or whatever makes sense, right? At ProCNC, we had a ton of part numbers that we had sort of Kanban agreements with, right? Where we said, all right, this is the annual amount. It's just an estimate that's not contractually obligated, but like this is, what we think we're going to use. That's what the customer said. And we said, great, we will guarantee to always have this many on the shelf. We can turn them around in 2 days to you.
Right.
But we had that sort of agreement, long-term agreement,
right,
that really allowed us to do that forecasting, do that scheduling, do that hiring. When that customer knows that we've got their back that way, that's a level of comfort that they really like.
Yeah,
right?
It goes a long way.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. Lots of times when I do a shop tour with a new customer, I will actually make sure to take them into our inventory area and show them, oh yeah, these are jobs that are, some of them have PO, some of them don't, but because of our long-term relationship with this part and this customer, we're running certain economic run quantities that make sense for us.
Yep.
Knowing what they're going to buy in the future.
Yep. That's exactly right. Yeah. Cool. So the second one, which we've already talked about, is you got to offer prototyping services as well, right? I know there are some companies out there that they just want production. They don't want to do small quantities. And in fact, I know Nick couldn't make this one, but he wanted to mention Jason Primo had a post recently about, his work, talking about how he, offers prototype services and that turns into production, right? And you just mentioned that too. Like a lot of the parts you make turn into production if it goes to production. And that's absolutely essential. At our shop, we ended up splitting off sort of two different divisions. We had our production division that was machines in a separate room, separate area of the facility. We had our prototype division, and we had dedicated chips. And we were really lucky. We had like half a dozen senior level journeyman programmer machinists, setup guys that loved doing one-off work.
Right.
And we could turn parts around incredibly quickly. And oftentimes that's what you need to win that production work, because
so you had a physical different area to do prototype over.
We production. Did. Wow. Absolutely physical. Yeah. Okay. It was a complete value stream split. So when an order came in, if it made sense, if it's 5 or less, or it's a brand new part number or whatever, it's like it went over this way. There was a different project manager, different people did the programming. It was a whole different value stream. We learned the hard way about that. I can't say we did that off the initial bat. We started, having it all mixed. It's like we just hadn't thought that much about it. So we would be doing an order of 500 parts, and we get a rush order of 2, and we'd be like, all right, let's tear down the machine, or like on second shift or whatever. Like, let's try to insert this order of 2.
Okay.
It was such a mess, such a hassle, right? When you have limited machines to choose from, and it makes the bigger production work less profitable because you're setting things up twice and you're messing with your lead times. And so we ultimately decided to break it apart. And I think it was one of the best decisions our shop ever made, quite honestly.
Yeah, that's interesting. We've almost looked at doing the opposite where, so in my main facility, it is mixed on the floor. I mean, it still goes to those, highly skilled machinists, but it might be in the cell right next to a production job.
Sure.
But the opposite that we've looked at is, so one of our other locations historically has done only production work.
Right.
And they're really good at production work. That's their norm, right? Is to stand there and make parts one after another. And so we've actually done kind of the opposite. We'll send production work to that location, high quantity production work to that location, versus keep it in our main location.
Right. Got it. Jason is with a Claim, so probably apologize, Jason. Claim Aerospace. I think one of the reasons that's so critical is that, especially if you have a good relationship with the engineers at a company, right? And you're like, I'm here for you. I'll make your job easy, make your life easy. If you have a new design you're working on and it's not quite released yet, we're your go-to team to just be right there with you, work side by side, work through the problems, the kinks. And very often the engineers have that authority to make those choices of where they're sending that prototype work.
Oh, sure.
And then when it comes to production, oftentimes the procurement team is already behind schedule and stressed, spread too thin.
Yep.
It's like, all right, they did the prototypes and they already have the production capability. Yeah, just fine. Just send it to them.
Right.
Get a new price and call it good. So I don't want to call it lazy, but there's just this natural likelihood that you're going to win that work. So, but without those prototyping services, it's tough to win new part numbers unless a company's going through a strategic process of like reallocating work to their vendors, and then you're probably going to be just competing on price, which is always hard. If you're trying to move something from an incumbent production shop, you just got to offer something better, which often comes down to price.
Yeah, sure.
So speaking of price, that's the sort of the third one. As you kind of alluded to, when you're estimating, you gotta make sure you're quoting, for that quantity that they're asking for, right? And that means very likely sharpening your pencil on things. And I don't know how you quote things when you have your robot loading it versus not, in terms of what labor, because labor is, honestly one of the biggest costs of any shop out there.
Sure.
And so if you can run things unattended or, get the density up in your fixturing and run it for, an hour a couple hours at a time while your people run other machines or set up other machines. Since many shops, I think, will sharpen their pencils when the quantities get higher and the machines can run more unattended and you get more spindle uptime, it comes into play more often.
Yeah, I think we find, so I don't have enough automation to assume I'll always be running automated on any given job. So we generally price ours like it will be run by an operator standing at the machine. And because I don't have 20 robots to keep automation going. So, and when that job comes in, it may not get to run on the robot, right? Because something else is. But we do know, I think I was telling you before, like there's a couple of customers we know, everything we bid for them, if we win it, we might run it for the next 30 years, right? We pay real close attention to the NRE costs.
Yep.
And whether or not we're willing to completely absorb those. And usually we are, because they're not, it's not buying a new machine to run the work. It's
in the grand scheme of it, it's
some programming and some first time run costs and maybe a tool or something. Then we'll just absorb that because we know if we get this, they've generally given us those annual usage quantities and or at least estimated and so forth. Yep. And we can really look at that. And then we kind of will price it based on what we think our best economic run quantity is. So we won't necessarily price it on 2,500 a year. We'll price it on, we're going to make 5 runs of 500.
Sure.
Something like that.
That makes total sense. Now, how often do you ask for something like target pricing?
We ask quite a bit. Matter of fact, we're working with a new customer right now. They're very, very transparent about their target pricing. Very front, just very, here it is.
Right.
They're giving us their internal material costs, their labor costs, everything.
Oh, wow.
There's been some that we've looked at and gone, how in the world are they doing that?
Right.
And then there's others we look at and we thought, okay, well, we've got that beat.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, we ask for target a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that, I guess, really comes down more to those specific buyers we just have a great relationship with, and
Sure.
and we can kind of work towards their target.
When I was in the position, it came into play more for me when I was, quoting for a brand new customer I'd never worked with before. It's like, we really want to win your business. Kind of what does it take to get in here? And can you offer some targets? Sometimes they don't want to offer it,
Right.
because I think they fear, what if we give you a number that's higher than what you're going to quote anyway?
Sure.
But oftentimes they will, and that's just valuable. And yeah, the better you get to know them, and the more you sort of learn your win percentage for their work, you're like, yeah, I have a pretty good idea of who we're up against and where I need to be to win this work.
Well, and I've, to your point there too. I mean, I've also always made a point too of being transparently not greedy, and that.
Oh, sure. I think it's a good long-term strategy.
Yeah, people have sent us a target price that we could kill,
right?
And we still we just quote our price,
mm-hmm.
and we've got their target beat, and
yep.
and then there are some that we're over their target price, but when they look at the group, we're in line.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. To if you can offer lower, it wins a lot of trust.
Sure.
And I would say, even if you're in the middle of a big, production contract or whatever, maybe you quoted this part for $50 and you figured out a way to make it way cheaper, you will win so many points if you call them out of the blue and say, hey, I know we're making these for you for $50, but we just figured out a way to double our tool life or this or that, and we want to offer them to you for 47.
Oh yeah,
unsolicited.
Absolutely.
So, they're like, wow, these guys are a partner with ours. So they're just going to be more trusting and more transparent. And the last thing I'd say on this is, follow up when you're quoting. Follow up and ask for feedback. Right? It's like, hey, how did we come in? Can you give us any ballpark idea of how we did? Yeah, you were 10% higher. I gave it to someone else. Okay, right. Well, next time we'll try to do better. And a lot of times they'll be transparent. You've been transparent with them as well.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yep. So next one, got two more. I think it's just absolutely essential to sell your quality management system or your business management system, right? This is a drum I've been beating for years, but one of the reasons this initially came to me was way back in the ProCNC years. I mean, we certainly use ProShop as a sales tool, but I was talking with a senior buyer for a pretty large aerospace company, and he had probably been in many hundreds of shops over his career, right? Sure. And he said, when I walk into a shop, his name was Rod. He said, when I walk into a shop, within 5 minutes, I can smell the chaos. Like if this shop doesn't have their act together, there's no hiding it from me, right? I've been in enough shops and seen enough details that I know when a shop has a beautiful website and a fancy brochure and nice new machines, and you walk in and it's an absolute chaotic mess, right? And he's like, I'm not going to send my work to that kind of shop, right? I want to know when I place an order that I can basically forget about it, and I know those parts are going to show up on time, good paperwork, good quality, and I can just move on and focus my attention on something more value added than babysitting a supplier that has terrible processes. Right. So that just resonated with me so hard. And I've seen so many examples of that time and time again, with our customers, or other examples where buyers, I think I've said this, they're in the risk mitigation business. They want to know that if they place an order, they don't need to, then, because if you don't, if it really is production work and they're relying on your parts coming in on time so they can build their product and ship it to their customer, you had better believe they don't want to have their vendor being the one holding up production.
Right. That's where they get pressure back from their boss.
Oh man,
where's your vendor's parts?
They do that enough times, they could lose their job. So
sure.
Yeah. So I think really selling how you make parts, how you do contract review, how you do risk assessment, how you do quality, how you do your buy-offs, your in-process inspection. All those things are just, how you do scheduling, how you do capacity planning. Every part of that is part of the sales process to make sure that you can instill a level of confidence in them that you are the right supplier. Right?
Well, Paul, everything you just said there makes me think of, the last, I've told you, we've been on a pretty deliberate sales effort over the last 12 months with some real strategic targets. And so we've had some pretty big meetings in the shop over the past year. And it's almost funny. We hardly get to the shop. We might spend 2 hours together and an hour and 45 of it's in the conference room showing them ProShop.
Right.
Honestly. I go, because I will walk them through. Generally, when they're here, we've already estimated some of their parts. Maybe we haven't been awarded any of it yet. And I'll just pull up one of their estimates and I'll show them how we built their estimate. And and this is where we're at. And this is the quote you got. Now, if you send me an order, here's the next 10 steps that happen before I ship it to you. Right. And I show them, how we process a work order, how it goes to the floor. The quality, the whole QMS module that gives them all the confidence in the world that we're going to send them quality parts. All the way through shipping that hopefully we're going to deliver them on time also. If there's any hiccups along the way, that I have a tool that's going to help me communicate with them about those hiccups.
I have 3 very quick stories, 3 different shops, basically the same kind of thing. One of my good friends, Jamie, who I've interviewed him before on podcasts. He was at a customer trying to win some bigger production contracts. He had done some work, but wasn't entrenched as deep as he wanted to be. And he was telling him about ProShop and how they transitioned to this, and their shop was now paperless. And the guy was having a little harder time understanding, well, exactly how does that work? What do you mean? And so they were in the conference room of this big OEM, and Jamie said, well, can I pull out my phone and cast to your TV here in the conference room?
Oh, wow.
And so he cast to it. He logged into ProShop on his phone and gave I think he said almost an hour demo on exactly how they do it all in ProShop from his cell phone.
Yeah.
Right. And the buyer and the sourcing planner guy were just jaws on the floor, whoa, this is so impressive, so much better than what we do internally. And they're this is the kind of shop that we want to partner with that's going to give us great support and service. So
yeah, sure.
So that was just, I thought, a really fun story. Recently, one of our customers was trying to really, win ultimately some production work for some of the major primes for the military. So they got to the point where they had a branch of the military and 2 prime contractors at their facility for an entire week. I think they said the audit was 15 people collectively. And they're actually, I learned later, the goal of this meeting was to just win the ability to do some development work.
Okay.
Some R&D work. Similar to you just described, much of the week was focused on ProShop and just sort of this quality system and business system that they use to make their parts. And some of the auditors said this was the most the best audit they've ever done and the smoothest. And at the end of the week, they were actually immediately awarded production contract.
Oh, wow.
That ranking, you are already approved now for production work, not just development work.
Wow.
So right off the bat. And then the last one was a company that did a ton of work for, I think it was Raytheon, maybe. Their prior audits, when they would win a contract, but before Raytheon would issue them purchase orders, they would do a post-award review. It's a PAR audit. And they always had trouble on that with their QMS, quite honestly. Their old QMS was very paper-based and folders and, just sort of really manual. And after implementing ProShop, they won this contract. They had the PAR audit, and the auditors were just so blown away by this digital system that was sort of at the same level as their technical ability, which was really off the charts already, that they won a bunch of new contracts almost immediately.
Oh, wow.
Just because they were so confident this one spot that used to be weak for them. So it can really make a difference.
I think I shared with you a month or two ago. I had one of these types of meetings, but it was online.
Yeah.
It was Zoom, and it turned into, I just shared my screen and walked through ProShop.
Sure.
And of how I would handle, their work and ensure quality and all that. Yep. And at the end, I don't remember her exact words, but it was like, well, I think maybe I just need to make sure all our vendors use ProShop.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes you feel good that you do use it, and the tool it is to run our day to day, but also the confidence that our customers have in it.
One of the early indications that I knew we were onto something around this area was we got a call pretty much out of the blue from a buyer at an aerospace OEM. Not like Boeing, but a company that made major subsystems for them. And they said, hey, would you be willing to send us a list of all of your customers, ProShop customers that have AS9100 certification?
Wow.
Because we've seen in our supply base, the shops that are using ProShop are higher performing, better communication, better delivery, better quality than on average than all the other shops. Wow. And we want more vendors using ProShop. I was like, whoa.
Well, and kudos to them for having the level of data collection to analyze down and break that down.
Sure.
That's amazing.
It was a very exciting phone call to get.
Yeah. Sure.
And then the last one on my list is target the right customers, right? My example is like, if you want to get into aerospace work, or if you're already doing aerospace work, an airplane needs one set of landing gear, but it needs hundreds of seats, right?
Sure.
So go after the companies. If you're really sort of like greenfield looking for new customers out there, go after ones that have high volume work, right?
Makes sense.
The ones that just by the nature of what they make a lot of them, right? And then you show up with your QMS and you show up with, all the other things we already talked about, and they're the right conversations, the right people to be having those conversations with. So, so those are my points. I think, by focusing on those things we talked about, I've seen it. I've seen shops move the needle on moving from, prototype shops and low volume and high mix into that sort of more, medium to higher volumes and a lot of repeat, which again offers just a lot of comfort and stability and a lot of benefits. So,
well, this was very helpful to me, Paul. I mean, we're constantly looking to grow and do new things, and you gave me a lot of tidbits there that some of the stuff we're doing, some of the stuff we're not, and give me something good to talk about with my team and see how we can do some of this better ourselves.
Well, glad to be of service. I'm a huge champion of shops out there, and thank a machinist, and just how important what you guys do and all the other shops out there every day. And if we can, offer some guidance on how to make chips more often, then it's a good way to wrap up the show, right? Because if you're not making chips,
you're not making money.
Bam.
Bam.